Mark, a man whose life had always felt perfectly aligned, found himself nestled in the comforting routine of his suburban Austin home. As a graphic designer, his days were spent in the quiet hum of his home office, crafting visual stories for clients across the country. His wife, Sarah, was the vibrant counterpoint to his calm demeanor. Their life together was a tapestry woven with shared laughter, comfortable silences, and an unwavering sense of mutual support. Sarah, with her sharp intellect and boundless ambition, had recently embarked on a new chapter in her career. She had landed a demanding role as a marketing manager at a prominent tech company downtown, a significant step up that promised both challenges and rewards. The initial weeks of Sarah's new job brought subtle shifts to their well-established rhythm. She began coming home later, often well into the evening, sometimes as late as 9 or 10 o'clock. Mark, ever the supportive husband, understood. He'd prepare dinner, keeping it warm, and listen patiently as she recounted the day's triumphs and tribulations. Her boss, a Mr. Davies, seemed to be a constant presence in her narratives, always requiring late meetings, demanding project revisions, or pushing deadlines. Mark admired her dedication, her drive, and her ability to navigate the cutthroat world of corporate tech. He saw it as a testament to her strength, a necessary sacrifice for her burgeoning career. Yet, amidst his admiration, small, almost imperceptible doubts began to surface. Sarah's phone, once a casual fixture, now seemed to be perpetually on silent, its screen often face down on a surface, as if guarding its secrets. She was undeniably more tired, the sparkle in her eyes sometimes dulled by exhaustion, but there was also an occasional flicker of something else, a guardedness, a slight evasiveness that Mark couldn't quite place. He dismissed these fleeting observations, attributing them to the sheer intensity of her new professional life. A demanding job, he reasoned, could easily alter one's habits and disposition. He trusted Sarah implicitly. Their 5 years of marriage built on a foundation of absolute faith in one another. The first tangible crack in his unwavering trust appeared one Tuesday evening. Mark, having finished his own work earlier than usual, decided to call Sarah around 8 p.m. to ask if she'd prefer takeout or a home-cooked meal. He wanted to surprise her, alleviate some of her stress. The phone rang once, then twice. Before going straight to voicemail, he left a quick message, then went about preparing a simple pasta dish, waiting for her call back. An hour later, her name flashed on his screen. She apologized profusely, explaining that her phone had died during a critical meeting, a common occurrence with the heavy usage her job demanded. Mark nodded, listening to her explanation, but a tiny, discordant note played in his mind. He distinctly remembered her phone being fully charged when she left that morning, its battery indicator glowing a robust green. He didn't press the issue, not wanting to sound accusatory, but the incident lingered, a faint smudge on the otherwise clear canvas of his trust. Weeks passed, and the late nights continued. Mark found himself adjusting to a new normal, a life where Sarah's presence in the evenings was increasingly sporadic. Then came the evening that irrevocably altered his perception of their reality. He was in his home office, deeply engrossed in a video call with a client, headphones firmly planted over his ears. The client was detailing revisions to a logo design, his voice a drone in Mark's focused awareness. Sarah arrived home, the soft click of the lock barely audible to Mark. She must have assumed he was completely immersed in his work, oblivious to her arrival. She was on her phone, her voice a low murmur, distinct enough to cut through the muffled sounds of his client's voice. Mark caught fragments of her conversation, disjointed words that, when pieced together, began to form a chilling narrative. No, he's still on a call, he heard her whisper, a clear reference to him. Then, I told him it was late at work again. A cold coil tightened in Mark's stomach. The words hung in the air, undeniable and stark. He strained to hear more, his focus now entirely on her hushed tones. And then, a name, spoken softly, almost intimately. Just a few more minutes, David. The name wasn't Mr. Davies. It wasn't a colleague Mark recognized. It was a complete stranger. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. The comfortable hum of his home office became a deafening roar. His heart, which moments ago had beaten with the steady rhythm of a man content, now hammered against his ribs, a frantic drum of disbelief and dawning dread. The client's voice faded into an indistinguishable background noise. All Mark could hear was Sarah's whispered words, the unknown name and the deafening silence of his own shattered trust. His perfectly aligned life had just been violently knocked askew. The name David echoed in Mark's mind, a discordant note in the symphony of his life with Sarah. It was a stark contrast to the melody of their beginning, a memory he now replayed with a newfound unsettling clarity. He had met Sarah 5 years ago, a serendipitous encounter at a bustling coffee shop nestled near the vibrant campus of the University of Texas. She was then a bright-eyed business student, her textbooks splayed across a small table, a look of focused determination on her face. Mark, just embarking on his journey as a freelance graphic designer, found himself captivated by her energy, her quick wit, and the genuine warmth that radiated from her. Their early days were filled with the intoxicating rush of new love. They spent countless hours exploring Austin's hidden gems, sharing dreams over late-night tacos, and simply reveling in each other's company. There was an undeniable spark, an easy connection that transcended mere conversation. They talked for hours about everything and nothing, discovering a shared vision for a quiet, fulfilling life, a future filled with family and shared adventures. Mark remembered feeling an almost immediate sense of belonging with Sarah, a comfort he hadn't experienced before. Their love blossomed, a natural progression built on mutual respect and an unwavering openness. The proposal had been a moment of pure magic, a hike along the scenic Barton Creek greenbelt, the setting sun painting the sky in hues of orange and purple as Mark knelt, a nervous tremor in his voice, and asked her to be his wife. Her joyous yes had been the sweetest sound he'd ever heard. Their wedding was a small, intimate affair, surrounded by their closest friends and family, a day filled with laughter, tears of happiness, and the promise of a lifetime together. The first few years of their marriage were a testament to their bond, a period of shared growth, unwavering trust, and a deep, abiding affection that seemed unshakable. Sarah had always been driven, a woman with aspirations that stretched beyond the ordinary. Even in their early years, she spoke of wanting to make a significant impact, to climb the corporate ladder, to prove her capabilities. She worked diligently at her previous marketing job, but Mark could sense her growing restlessness, a feeling that she was capable of more, that she was meant for bigger things. When she expressed her desire to seek out a new, more challenging role, one that offered greater responsibility and a higher salary, Mark had been her biggest cheerleader. He supported her wholeheartedly, knowing that her ambition was an intrinsic part of who she was, and he loved her for it. 6 months ago, her perseverance paid off. Sarah landed the coveted marketing manager position at Innovate Solutions, a prominent tech company known for its cutting-edge innovations. It was a significant milestone, a monumental leap in her career. The salary was impressive, the responsibilities vast, and the prestige undeniable. They celebrated the news with genuine joy, Mark bursting with pride for his accomplished wife. He remembered the glow on her face, the palpable excitement in her voice as she spoke of the opportunities that lay ahead. Initially, the changes were subtle, almost imperceptible. The demands of her new role meant longer hours, an increased level of stress, and a more rigorous schedule. Sarah would often come home, tired but invigorated, ready to vent about the pressures of her day. Mr. Davies, her new boss, quickly became a recurring character in her narratives. He was portrayed as a demanding figure, a perfectionist who expected his team to put in extra time, to go above and beyond. Mark, having navigated his own share of tough bosses in his freelance career, understood. He empathized with her, offering a listening ear and a comforting presence. He saw it as part and parcel of a high-powered corporate job. But as the weeks turned into months, the late nights began to escalate, transforming from an occasional occurrence to a regular pattern. What started as once a week soon became 3 or 4 times, sometimes even more. Each time, Sarah had a plausible explanation, a perfectly logical reason why she needed to stay late, why Mr. Davies required her presence. There was always a critical meeting, a project deadline looming, a client presentation that needed last-minute tweaks. Mark, operating from a place of unwavering trust, never questioned her deeply. He focused on being the supportive husband, ensuring she had a warm meal, a comfortable home to return to, and a safe space to decompress. He believed in her explanations, in her dedication, and in the sanctity of their marriage. The idea that she would ever intentionally deceive him was simply unfathomable. He had implicitly trusted her words, her stories, her every assurance. Now, with the name David hanging in the air, the foundation of that trust felt like it was crumbling beneath his feet. The name David echoed in Mark's mind, a discordant note that refused to be silenced. He tried to rationalize it, to find a logical explanation that would dispel the icy dread coiling in his gut. Perhaps it was a new colleague, a client Sarah was working closely with, or even a casual acquaintance. But the way she had said it, the hushed tone, the conspiratorial quality of her voice, and the palpable secrecy that had enveloped her since her new job began, it all gnawed at him, a relentless burrowing into the bedrock of his trust. The image of her phone, face down, perpetually on silent, flashed through his mind, now imbued with a sinister new meaning. He found himself observing Sarah with a new, unwelcome intensity. Every gesture, every word, every shift in her demeanor was scrutinized through the lens of suspicion. He noticed, for instance, that she would often head straight for the shower the moment she walked through the door, even if she claimed to have just left a long meeting. It struck him as odd. Why the immediate need to cleanse herself? And sometimes a faint, unfamiliar scent would linger in the air after she had passed, a perfume that wasn't hers, or a subtle aroma he couldn't quite place. It was fleeting, easily dismissed, but now his heightened senses registered it as another unsettling piece of the puzzle. Her once open and affectionate nature seemed to have receded, replaced by a subtle distance, a less frequent touch, a gaze that often seemed to be elsewhere. Her phone became a fortress, an extension of her being that was never out of her sight. It was always with her, even accompanying her into the bathroom, a habit she had never displayed before. If Mark, out of habit, reached for it to quickly check the weather or look up a recipe, she would either make an immediate excuse, claiming she needed it for an urgent work message, or hover over him, her presence a silent, watchful guard. The casual intimacy of sharing devices, once a given in their relationship, had vanished, replaced by a subtle but firm barrier. In a moment of desperation, his mind, usually so straightforward and ethical, briefly entertained the dark thought of installing a tracking app on her phone. The idea, once conceived, filled him with an immediate wave of shame and revulsion. He hated the thought of spying, of actively seeking to confirm his worst fears. It felt like a violation of everything they had built, a betrayal of the very trust he desperately wanted to believe still existed. He recoiled from the notion, pushing it away, still clinging to the hope that his suspicions were unfounded, a product of his own overactive imagination. Sarah, perhaps sensing a shift in the atmosphere, or perhaps genuinely feeling the pang of neglect, would occasionally make promises. "We need a date night soon," she would say, or, "Let's plan a weekend away, just the two of us." Mark's heart would lift, a flicker of hope igniting within him. But invariably, these promises would dissolve into thin air, canceled at the last minute by an urgent call from Mr. Davies, a sudden crisis at work, or an unexpected late-night meeting. Mark found himself increasingly alone in their once bustling home, the silence amplifying his growing sense of isolation. One evening, unable to bear the unspoken tension any longer, Mark attempted a gentle confrontation. He approached her as she was unwinding after another late night, trying to keep his voice calm, devoid of accusation. "You've been working so much, Sarah," he began, his voice laced with genuine concern. "I miss you. We barely see each other anymore." He hoped for a moment of connection, a shared lament about the demands of her job. Instead, Sarah stiffened, her shoulders tensing. She turned to him, her eyes flashing with a familiar defensiveness. "You don't understand the pressure I'm under, Mark," she retorted, her voice edged with frustration. "This isn't some 9-to-5 job. Mr. Davies expects results, and I have to deliver. It's not fair for you to make me feel guilty about working hard." The conversation died there. Mark, not wanting to escalate into a full-blown argument without tangible proof, backed off, the unspoken words hanging heavy between them. He felt like he was walking on eggshells, constantly afraid of triggering her defensiveness. Then came a small, seemingly insignificant lie, but one that stood out like a beacon in the murky waters of his doubt. Sarah mentioned one morning that her car needed an oil change. She told him she had taken it to a new place, a quick lube shop conveniently located near her office downtown. Mark nodded, filing the information away. A few days later, while casually tidying up the living room, he found a crumpled receipt tucked inside the pocket of her purse. It was for an oil change, dated the day she claimed to have gone. But the address on the receipt was not for a shop downtown. It was for a small, independent garage, barely a mile from their own home, a place he knew she had never frequented before. It was a minuscule detail, easily overlooked, but for Mark, it was a glaring inconsistency. Why lie about something so trivial? Why fabricate a story about a car repair shop when the truth was so innocuous? The small lie, like a tiny crack in a dam, allowed a trickle of cold, hard suspicion to seep through, confirming his worst fears. The rationalizations he had clung to, the hope that David was merely a colleague, began to crumble, replaced by the chilling certainty that something was profoundly, irrevocably wrong. The name David was no longer a fleeting whisper in Mark's mind. It was a blaring siren, a constant jarring presence that hammered at the fragile walls of his composure. The casual mention of a new colleague, a client, or an innocent acquaintance had long since evaporated, replaced by a chilling certainty. He couldn't shake the image of Sarah, hushed and secretive, uttering that name. The small lie about the oil change, seemingly insignificant, had been the final straw, confirming that his wife was not just working late, but actively constructing a web of deceit. Driven by a desperate need for answers and a gnawing dread that refused to be appeased, Mark found himself, almost instinctively, turning to the digital world. He typed, "Innovate Solutions Employees David," into a search engine, his fingers trembling slightly as he hit enter. The results page loaded, and there, staring back at him from a LinkedIn profile, was a man named David Miller, listed as a senior architect at Innovate Solutions. A cold dread, far more potent than any he had previously experienced, washed over him. The photo showed a man in his late 30s, handsome, with an air of confident professionalism. This wasn't some anonymous name. This was a real person, a colleague of Sarah's, a potential rival for her affections. The pieces, once disjointed and confusing, were beginning to click into place, forming a picture he desperately wished he didn't have to see. A few days later, Sarah announced with a forced cheerfulness that her company was hosting a major client dinner. It was a big event, she explained, crucial for securing a new contract. Mark, though still reeling from his discovery of David Miller, tried to appear supportive. "Partners aren't invited," she added, almost as an afterthought, her gaze not quite meeting his. "It's strictly for senior management and key project leads." Mark, still clinging to the remnants of his trust, nodded, feigning understanding. He believed her, or rather, he wanted to believe her. He wanted to believe that this was just another legitimate work event, that his suspicions were merely a cruel trick of his own mind. That evening, a mundane errand unexpectedly shattered his carefully constructed facade of denial. Mark was driving home from a late grocery run, the mundane glow of the supermarket lights still lingering in his periphery. He took a detour, a slightly longer route that often provided a moment of quiet reflection. As he drove past a particularly upscale restaurant downtown, one he knew Innovate Solutions frequently used for corporate events and client entertaining, his eyes were drawn to a familiar figure through the large panoramic windows. His breath hitched in his throat. It was Sarah. But she wasn't with Mr. Davies. She was seated at a prime table, bathed in the soft glow of the restaurant's ambient lighting, and across from her, leaning in conspiratorially, was David Miller, the man from the LinkedIn profile. They were laughing, their heads close together, an intimacy in their posture that spoke volumes. It wasn't the polite, professional distance of colleagues. It was the comfortable, unguarded closeness of something far more personal. A sharp pang, like a physical blow, struck Mark in the chest. He instinctively pulled his car over to the curb, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly, his knuckles turned white. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic, desperate rhythm. He watched, transfixed and horrified, as they continued their animated conversation, Sarah's smile wide, genuine, and directed solely at David. The image of her coming home, late, tired, offering flimsy excuses about demanding meetings with Mr. Davies, crashed down on him, each lie a hammer blow to his soul. The entire narrative she had woven, the carefully constructed facade of her demanding job and her dedicated boss, shattered into a million irreparable pieces before his eyes. He watched as they finally rose from the table, their hands brushing lightly, almost imperceptibly, as they navigated their way out of the restaurant. They emerged onto the bustling street, a slight chill in the night air. Mark saw them walk towards David's car, a sleek, expensive model he recognized from the LinkedIn profile's background. David opened the passenger door for Sarah, a chivalrous gesture that twisted a knife in Mark's gut. She slid in, and David followed, getting into the driver's seat. Mark watched, frozen in place, as the car pulled away from the curb and disappeared into the stream of city traffic. The late meetings with Mr. Davies' story, the cornerstone of her deception, had just been utterly and unequivocally demolished. Mark drove home in a daze, the city lights blurring into an indistinct smear. He felt a profound sickness spreading through his entire being, a nausea that went far beyond mere physical discomfort. His world, the stable, loving universe he had built with Sarah, had just been turned upside down, violently ripped apart by the stark, undeniable reality he had witnessed. He felt a desperate urge to confront her, to scream, to demand answers. But the shock was too profound. He couldn't. He needed to process this, to somehow absorb the magnitude of the betrayal before he could even begin to articulate his pain. Later that night, Sarah arrived home, her usual story on her lips. She walked in, her purse slung over her shoulder, a cheerful air about her. "Long night," she announced, her voice light, "but productive. We made some real headway with the new client." She leaned in, pressing a quick, perfunctory kiss on his cheek. Mark forced a smile, a grotesque contortion of his features, the taste of ash in his mouth. He played along, a bitter charade, feeling like a stranger in his own home, a silent observer in the destruction of his own life. The woman who had just kissed him, the woman he had loved and trusted implicitly, was a stranger. Mark spent the entire night wide awake, staring at the ceiling, the darkness amplifying the torment in his mind. He replayed every moment, every lie, every excuse, every stolen moment of intimacy he had witnessed. The small doubts, the red flags he had dismissed, the trusting nature he had worn like a badge of honor. They now mocked him, each one a testament to his blindness. He saw now how carefully she had constructed her narrative, how expertly she had manipulated his trust. The pain was immense, a crushing weight that threatened to suffocate him. But beneath the pain, a cold, hard resolve began to form. He knew what he had to do. He needed to find out everything. He needed to know the full extent of her betrayal, every single detail, so that he could finally confront the truth and reclaim his life. Driven by a cold, clinical resolve that replaced the raw pain, Mark formulated a plan. He couldn't confront Sarah yet. He lacked the irrefutable evidence, the kind that would leave no room for denial or manipulation. He needed concrete proof, undeniable facts that would expose the full extent of her betrayal. He felt like a detective in his own life, sifting through fragments, piecing together a shattered reality. The thought of spying, once abhorrent, now felt like a necessary evil, a desperate measure to uncover the truth. He remembered Sarah sometimes used his old laptop, tucked away in the back of his home office closet, when hers was charging or when she just needed a quick check of something. He retrieved it, the dust motes dancing in the light as he pulled it out. His heart pounded with a mix of dread and grim determination as he powered it on. He navigated through the familiar interface, his mind racing. He checked the browser history, the recently opened documents, anything that might offer a clue. Most of it was innocuous, work-related, or quickly deleted. But then he remembered Sarah's meticulous nature, her habit of deleting things she didn't want him to see. He went to the trash bin, a place she might have overlooked in her haste. And there it was, partially undeleted, a fragment of an email that sent a fresh wave of icy dread through him. The sender was David. The subject line, though truncated, clearly referenced a hotel booking, and the content, though incomplete, confirmed a reservation for a business trip next weekend. The hotel name, a high-end establishment, was clearly visible. A few days later, as if on cue, Sarah announced her impending departure. "I have to go on a last-minute business trip," she declared, her voice tinged with a feigned reluctance. "Mr. Davies needs me in Dallas. It's a small team, just him and a couple of us from marketing, to finalize the big client deal." Mark feigned understanding, nodding slowly, his face a mask of concern. Inside, a storm raged. He knew it was a lie. He knew the hotel. He knew the true companion. The email fragment, once a mere suspicion, now solidified into irrefutable evidence. The decision formed in his mind, clear and unwavering. He was going to follow her. It was a drastic, almost cinematic move, but he saw no other way. He needed to witness it with his own eyes, to remove any lingering doubt, any possibility of her twisting the truth. He booked a last-minute flight to Dallas, choosing a different airline and a slightly later arrival time to avoid any chance encounters. To provide himself with an alibi, a reason for his absence, he told Sarah he was going to visit his parents for the weekend, a plausible excuse that would allow him to disappear without raising suspicion. He watched her leave, her small suitcase in hand, a sense of profound sadness and betrayal weighing him down. The drive to the airport, the flight itself, was a blur. Mark arrived in Dallas, the unfamiliar city lights doing little to distract from the turmoil within him. He rented a car, making sure it was an unremarkable model, and drove directly to the high-end hotel mentioned in David's email. He found a discreet parking spot across the street, partially obscured by a row of trees, and began his stakeout. The hours crawled by, each minute an eternity. He felt a profound sense of self-loathing, the indignity of his situation pressing down on him. He, a man who had always prided himself on his trust and open heart, was now reduced to hiding in a car, spying on his own wife. But the desperate need for truth, for answers, eclipsed the shame. He needed to know. He had to know. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he saw them. A taxi pulled up to the hotel's grand entrance. The door opened, and out stepped Sarah, elegant and composed. But she wasn't alone. Beside her, his arm lightly brushing hers, was David Miller. They looked relaxed, their faces illuminated by the hotel's opulent lights. They walked towards the entrance, their pace unhurried, their bodies subtly aligned. Then Mark saw it. David reached for Sarah's hand, his fingers intertwining with hers. They shared a knowing smile, a shared glance that spoke of intimacy and shared secrets. They checked in together, their heads close, their voices low. Mark watched, a hollow ache in his chest, as they walked towards the elevators, still holding hands, and disappeared from view. The final, painful confirmation. The truth, in all its brutal clarity, was laid bare before him. The business trip to Dallas with Mr. Davies was a cruel, elaborate lie. He felt a wave of nausea, a dizzying sensation of the world spinning out of control. He pulled out his phone, his hand trembling, and took a picture of the hotel entrance, a time-stamped image of the moment they entered together. It was a cold, hard piece of evidence, a visual record of his shattered reality. He didn't know if he would ever use it, but he needed it. He needed proof, for himself, for the inevitable confrontation. The drive back home was a blur of highway lights and the relentless hum of the engine. Mark was numb, heartbroken, but also strangely resolute. The uncertainty, the agonizing doubt, had been replaced by a grim certainty. The denial, the hope he had desperately clung to, had finally been stripped away. He knew what he had to do. The path ahead, though fraught with pain, was now clear. He was no longer a man lost in a maze of suspicion. He was a man who had faced the truth, however ugly, and was prepared to act. He was going home, not to confront her in a fit of rage, but to systematically dismantle the edifice of lies she had built around him. Mark, his heart a cold, hard knot in his chest, meticulously began to gather his evidence. The photograph from Dallas, a stark, undeniable image of Sarah and David Miller holding hands, was his first and most damning piece. He had taken it with a steady hand, despite the tremor in his soul. Now, back in the quiet, sterile silence of his home, he transferred it to his laptop, zooming in, ensuring every detail was clear. This wasn't about vengeance in the heat of the moment. It was about surgical precision, about building an irrefutable case. He then turned his attention to their joint bank account statements. Sarah had always handled most of their finances, a task he had trusted her with implicitly. Now, with a click of his mouse, years of transactions laid bare before him. He scrolled through months of records, a grim determination etched on his face. He found charges that made his stomach churn. Expensive dinners at exclusive restaurants, not just in Austin, but in other cities she had claimed to visit for work conferences. Then there were the weekend getaways, luxurious hotel stays in picturesque towns, often coinciding with her late nights or business trips. He also uncovered several significant jewelry purchases, items Sarah had proudly displayed, claiming they were work gifts or bonuses from Innovate Solutions. Each transaction was a fresh stab, a testament to her calculated deceit. He meticulously took screenshots of everything, organizing them into a folder on his desktop labeled Evidence. The digital trail was undeniable, a cold, hard record of her betrayal. He didn't wait for Sarah to return from her business trip to Dallas. He couldn't. The pretense was too much to bear. The thought of her walking back into their home, cheerful and oblivious, while he harbored such a devastating truth, was unbearable. Instead, he prepared their living room. He set up his laptop on the coffee table, the screen displaying the Dallas photograph prominently. Beside it, he neatly arranged printouts of the most incriminating bank statements and the partially recovered email from David. He wanted no room for denial, no space for her elaborate excuses. He waited, a strange calm settling over him, a sense of grim purpose. When Sarah eventually walked through the front door, a tired but cheerful smile on her face, her small travel bag in hand, she found Mark waiting. The air in the room was thick with an unspoken tension she couldn't immediately place. "Hey, honey," she said, her voice a little weary, but still light. "Long trip, but all wrapped up. Mr. Davies was really happy with our presentation." She started to walk past him, towards the kitchen, perhaps to grab a drink. But Mark's voice, calm and steady, stopped her dead in her tracks. "We need to talk, Sarah," he said, his voice devoid of emotion, a chilling contrast to the storm raging within him. She turned, a flicker of concern crossing her features. "Is everything okay? You look serious." Mark didn't respond with words. He simply gestured towards the coffee table. Her eyes followed his gaze, first to the laptop screen, then to the printouts. Her cheerful demeanor evaporated instantly. The smile faltered, then vanished completely. Her eyes widened as they landed on the photograph, her, holding hands with David Miller, walking into the Dallas hotel. A gasp escaped her lips, a small, choked sound. What is this?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. She knew, of course. The color drained from her face. Mark remained silent, allowing the images and documents to do their work. He watched her face contort, a rapid succession of emotions playing across it. Shock, confusion, dawning horror. And finally, a flicker of desperate panic. She picked up one of the bank statements, her fingers trembling, scanning the highlighted transactions, the jewelry, the dinners, the weekend stays. "Mark, I can explain," she stammered, her voice cracking. "It's not what it looks like. This was a work thing. David and I, we had to meet with clients. The hotel was for convenience." Mark finally spoke, his voice still low but laced with an icy edge she had never heard before. "Don't insult my intelligence, Sarah. The photograph is from Dallas. The email is from David, confirming a hotel booking. The bank statements show payments for luxury hotels and expensive gifts that you claimed were work bonuses. You told me you were with Mr. Davies, with a small team. You lied, Sarah. You lied to me repeatedly for months." Her denial crumbled. Tears welled in her eyes, spilling down her cheeks. She sank onto the sofa, burying her face in her hands. "I'm so sorry, Mark. I made a mistake. It was just once. It was a moment of weakness. I was lonely, pressured at work. Mr. Davies is so demanding, and David, he was just so understanding. It didn't mean anything. Please, Mark, please forgive me." She looked up, her eyes red and pleading. "I know I messed up, but we can fix this. We can get through this, just like we always do. I love you, Mark. It was just a stupid mistake." Then a desperate attempt to shift blame. "You've been so busy with your own work, Mark. You're always in your office, always on calls. I felt neglected. You don't understand the pressure I'm under at Innovate Solutions." Mark's composure, though strained, held. He felt nothing but a cold disgust at her words. "Don't you dare try to blame me for your choices, Sarah. My work never stopped me from being here for you. My work never involved lying to you, deceiving you, and sleeping with another man behind your back. This wasn't a stupid mistake or a moment of weakness. This was a calculated, sustained deception. This," he gestured to the evidence, "has been going on for a long time. The late nights, the demanding boss, the dead phone. It was all a lie." He stood over her, his stance firm, his voice unwavering. "I know everything, Sarah. How long it's been going on. The elaborate lies you told. The money you spent. I'm done. I want a divorce." Her sobs intensified, turning into gasps. "No, Mark, please, don't say that. We can work this out. I'll do anything." "No, we can't," Mark stated, his voice flat. "There's nothing to work out. The trust is gone. It's completely shattered. I've already consulted with a lawyer." He watched her face blanch even further. "I want you out of this house. And if you try to fight me on the divorce terms, if you try to make this difficult, I will use all of this evidence." He gestured to the laptop and printouts. "Every single piece of it. I will make sure everyone knows what you've done. And I'm going to tell your parents what you did, Sarah. They deserve to know the truth about their daughter." Sarah was utterly devastated. The weight of his words, the cold, unwavering resolve in his eyes, finally broke through her desperate pleas. She saw that he was serious, that there was no turning back. Her world, built on a foundation of lies, was crumbling around her. She had underestimated him, underestimated the depth of his pain and the strength of his resolve. She knew in that moment that she had truly lost everything. Sarah, defeated and broken, packed her bags within a week. The once vibrant home they had shared, filled with laughter and shared dreams, now felt eerily quiet and empty. Each item she placed in a box seemed to echo the hollowness in Mark's chest. He watched her go, not with triumph, but with a profound sense of loss, a silent farewell to the life they had built, and the woman he thought he knew. The silence that settled over the house after she left was deafening, a stark reminder of the void she had created. The divorce proceedings began swiftly, initiated by Mark's lawyer. Sarah, still reeling from the shock of Mark's unwavering resolve, attempted to negotiate to salvage some semblance of her former life, but Mark's legal team had a formidable case. The photo from Dallas, the meticulously compiled bank statements, and the recovered email from David Miller painted a damning picture of infidelity and financial impropriety. Sarah's own lawyer, a seasoned professional, quickly advised her to settle. The evidence was overwhelming, and fighting it would only prolong her agony, expose her further, and potentially lead to far more severe financial and reputational consequences. The thought of a public spectacle, of her deceit being laid bare in a courtroom, was enough to make her concede to Mark's terms, however painful they were. Despite the legal proceedings moving forward, a lingering hurt gnawed at Mark. The betrayal wasn't just personal. It had seeped into every aspect of their shared life, including Sarah's professional facade. He knew her late nights and business trips were not just about her affair, but also about the misuse of company resources to fund her illicit rendezvous. This realization that she had leveraged her professional standing to facilitate her personal deceit fueled a new, cold determination within him. He decided to take one more action, not out of petty revenge, but out of a sense of justice, to ensure that the professional consequences of her actions were not entirely sidestepped. He composed an anonymous email, carefully crafted to convey concern rather than malice. He addressed it to the HR department at Innovate Solutions, Sarah's former employer. In the email, he attached the incriminating photograph of Sarah and David in Dallas, along with select screenshots of the bank statements that clearly indicated the use of company funds for personal trips and lavish entertainment. He highlighted the dates and locations that coincided with her supposed business trips with Mr. Davies. He made it clear that he was a concerned party, with access to further proof if needed, subtly implying that this was just the tip of the iceberg. He clicked send, a sense of grim satisfaction settling over him. He wasn't seeking to destroy her, but to ensure that her professional world, which she had so carelessly intertwined with her personal betrayal, also faced accountability. A few weeks later, the ripple effects began to surface. Mark heard through a mutual acquaintance who worked in the same industry that David Miller was suddenly let go from Innovate Solutions. The official reason cited was restructuring, a common corporate euphemism, but the whispers among employees suggested otherwise. Soon after, Sarah also mysteriously left the company, her departure attributed to personal reasons. The speed and simultaneous nature of their exits were too coincidental to be ignored. Mark knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that his anonymous email had hit its mark. Innovate Solutions, a large tech company, likely had strict policies against workplace relationships, especially those involving the misuse of company resources, and they had acted decisively to protect their reputation and internal code of conduct. The professional world, it seemed, had its own way of delivering justice. The personal fallout, however, was still raw. Mark slowly began to tell his closest friends and family what had transpired. His parents, who had always adored Sarah, were shocked and heartbroken for their son. They offered him unwavering support, their love a comforting balm on his wounded soul. Sarah's parents, upon hearing the truth, were mortified and ashamed. They called Mark, their voices heavy with apologies and sorrow for their daughter's actions, expressing their profound disappointment in her. The shame of her betrayal extended beyond just Mark, casting a long shadow over her own family. Then came the email from Sarah. A long, tearful confession, filled with apologies, self-reproach, and desperate pleas for understanding. She wrote about losing herself, about the pressures of her job, about a misguided search for validation. She claimed deep regret, expressing how much she missed him and their life together. Mark read it, his eyes scanning the words, but he felt nothing but a hollow ache. The emotional well had run dry. It was too late. The words, once capable of healing or hurting him, now held no power. The Sarah who wrote that email was a stranger, a ghost of a past that he was determined to leave behind. With the divorce finalized and the professional consequences for Sarah and David enacted, Mark slowly, painstakingly, began to pick up the pieces of his shattered life. The empty house, once a symbol of his loss, gradually transformed under his touch. He redecorated, painting walls, rearranging furniture, creating a space that felt entirely his own, purged of the painful memories. He immersed himself in his work as a graphic designer, finding solace and purpose in creative projects. He reconnected with old friends he had inadvertently neglected during the tumultuous period, rediscovering the joy of shared laughter and camaraderie. He also began to explore hobbies he had put aside, hiking the familiar trails of the Barton Creek Greenbelt, the same place he had proposed to Sarah, now a place of healing and solitude, and dusting off his old guitar, strumming melodies that soothed his soul. Each small step, each rediscovered passion, was a testament to his resilience, a deliberate act of choosing to move forward. He was healing, slowly but surely, rebuilding his life on a foundation of self-worth and quiet strength. It had been a year since the divorce was finalized, a year since Sarah walked out of his life, taking with her not just her belongings, but a significant piece of Mark's past. Now, as he looked around his redecorated home, a sense of peace, hard-won and deeply cherished, filled him. The house felt lighter, infused with his own personality, a true sanctuary. His graphic design business was thriving, clients appreciating his renewed focus and creativity. He had rediscovered the simple joys of life, the crunch of leaves underfoot on a morning hike, the resonant chords of his guitar filling the evening air, the easy banter with friends over a casual dinner. He was doing well, truly well, a testament to his resilience. The experience, though profoundly painful, had also been a crucible for growth. Mark often found himself reflecting on the lessons learned, the hard-earned wisdom that had emerged from the ashes of his marriage. He had learned about the fragility of trust, how easily it could be shattered by a calculated deception. He had confronted the depth of betrayal, feeling its sting in every lie, every stolen moment. But he had also discovered an immense strength within himself, a capacity for endurance and recovery he hadn't known he possessed. The most crucial lesson, perhaps, was the importance of trusting his gut, of acknowledging the small red flags that had appeared early on, but which he had, in his trusting nature, chosen to ignore. He vowed never to make that mistake again, to listen to the quiet warnings of his intuition. Moving forward had been a deliberate and conscious decision, a daily commitment to rebuilding. He had started dating casually, dipping his toes back into the social scene, but with a newfound caution. He wasn't looking for anything serious yet, the wounds of the past still too fresh to allow for deep emotional investment. Instead, he enjoyed the process of meeting new people, The light-hearted conversations, the shared experiences, without the pressure of expectation. Each coffee date, each dinner out, was a small step towards a future he was cautiously optimistic about. A future where he could eventually open his heart again, but with wiser eyes. One crisp autumn afternoon, Mark found himself in a coffee shop he used to frequent with Sarah. It was a place filled with shared memories, a neutral ground where they had spent countless weekend mornings planning their future. He hadn't been there in ages, choosing to avoid the echoes of the past. But today, a client meeting had unexpectedly brought him to this part of town, and the familiar aroma of roasted beans had drawn him in. He was waiting in line, scrolling through his phone, when a familiar voice, a laugh he once knew intimately, cut through the gentle hum of conversation. His head snapped up. Across the crowded room and near a sun-drenched window sat Sarah, and beside her, David Miller. They looked different, not just older, but strained. The easy, confident smiles he remembered seeing in Dallas were gone, replaced by a subtle tension that seemed to cling to them like a second skin. Sarah, once vibrant and effervescent, seemed subdued, her shoulders slightly slumped. David, whose arrogant swagger Mark had once secretly resented, now appeared weary, his gaze distant. They were talking, but their body language spoke volumes. A lack of connection, an absence of the spark that had once ignited their illicit affair. They weren't looking at each other much, their conversation punctuated by long silences and fidgeting. They didn't see him. Lost in their own world of quiet discontent, a pang shot through Mark, sharp and sudden, but it wasn't pain or anger or even resentment. It was something else entirely, a profound sense of closure. He watched them for a few more moments, a tableau of a relationship that had started with such destructive intensity, now fizzling out into a quiet, unremarkable existence. He realized, with a clarity that settled deep in his bones, that he had truly moved on. The person he had been, the man devastated by betrayal, was no longer him. He was stronger, wiser, and unequivocally free. He picked up his coffee, a small, knowing smile playing on his lips, and walked out, leaving them to their strained silence. Their story was over. His, however, was just beginning. Mark often shared his story in snippets with close friends, using it as a cautionary tale, a testament to resilience. He would always end with a message, one he truly believed in, one he wished he had heeded sooner. Trust your gut. That small voice of intuition, the quiet flicker of doubt, is often trying to tell you something important. Stand up for yourself, even when it's hard, even when it feels like your world is crumbling. Your self-worth is paramount. And above all, remember the importance of honesty in a relationship, the bedrock upon which true connection is built. While betrayal hurts, deeply and profoundly, it is not the end. It is possible to heal, to rebuild, and to forge a stronger, happier life afterward. His life was living proof of that truth.